I have decided to keep a journal, to set down all my thoughts and the simple events of my day. I will keep this diary for 1 year, and at the end of that time, it will be destroyed.
I encouraged my son to enlist. It was a family tradition. 6 months later, he was dead in Iraq. I was lost.
My son's the reading of the Lord. Praise be God.
So how are you?
Oh, I'm fine.
No, really. It's been a while since we've talked. Even a pastor needs a pastor.
Did you see the doctor? You need someone to take care of you. I want you to be happy.
I know that nothing can change, and I know there is no hope.
Reverend Toller?
Yes, Mary.
You must come over. You must come over now.
Explosives.
She was becoming someone I didn't know.
Opportunistic diseases, anarchy, martial law. You will live to see this.
You had no idea that he was thinking of...
No, I'm so frightened.
These kids, they want certainty. Don't think, follow. They fall prey to extremism. It's a world without hope.
No, I have not lost my faith.
You think that what we did together was a sin?
I've seen enough real sin to know the difference.
You didn't tell the police, right?
Take a look at your own life before you criticize others.
These are frightening times. We have to be patient.
Well, somebody has to do something.
Are you washed in the blood, in the soul cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow?
My hands shake as I write these lines.
Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb?
Can God forgive us for what we've done to this world?
Who can know the mind of God?
I just think that you ask so many questions that are so important, especially to today's climate, and you dare to answer them, and also just remind us that we're all just human. So I'm just wondering how the story came to be and why you wanted to tell this story.
And all of a sudden, once I freed myself from the inhibitions I had about tackling such a subject and the possible repercussions of tackling such a subject, then it was just a matter of saying, okay, I'm going to do it now. What are all the films that I respect of this ilk? Watch them all again and figure out where you fit into this scheme. And so it was much more a level of calculation rather than spontaneous, quote unquote, inspiration.
It was so important, Ethan's performance. So how did you cast him and how did you work with him? Because I think this is the best role of his career.
Normally you don't write for an actor because that makes you a lazy writer. You do everything you can not to connect what you're writing with any personage. But about halfway through the script, I started thinking about Ethan because there is a certain physiognomy of the tormented man of the cloth. And then I meet with him and I said, now Ethan, do you know what a recessive performance is? He's never really worked on the recessive interior side. When you're performing and you sense any amount of interest about what you're saying, lean away. But I thought Ethan would be a very interesting actor as a recessive, rejecting actor.
And so even though it's slow, you've managed to build up this intensity into it. So how did you work that into the pacing?
And here's what happened, Illyse. I set out to do a slow film, a durational film that takes its time. And then when I screened it, and somebody said afterwards, this is not a slow movie. But I thought it was, because I was using all of these withholding devices, delayed cuts, certain kinds of composition, lack of music. And at some point, the viewer does one of two things. Either they get up and leave, or they start leaning toward you. And once they start leaning toward you, then a whole new game has started, because our film audiences are not inclined to give. They are inclined to receive.
When writing this film, you would constantly ask yourself, what would Tarkovsky do? And that then led to the dream sequence.
The world of the spirit. So now I've got to go there at the end. But I think I need to tell the audience that this world exists, and that don't be surprised if we go there. And that's when I literally said to myself, what would Tarkovsky do? And I said, well, Tarkovsky would have them levitate. And I said, yes, that's what I'll do. I'll have them levitate.
I'd love to open it up to audience questions. Yeah.
In Diary of a Country Priest, the young priest, Claude Ledoux, has one moment of exterior liberation. He's on his way to the village, and a kid he knows has a motor scooter and offers him a ride. And he sits on the back of this motor scooter, and he is exhilarated. Never ridden in a motor scooter before. And you can see his face sort of exhilarated that this is what life can do. Life can offer you these kinds of thrills. Of course, he goes on, to reject them. And I said, I need to do the equivalent in this film. And so that's where the idea of the cycling scene came, which is just a moment of enjoyment of the physical world. And a gun didn't feel right for this type of death. Because a gun begins as an aggression toward others, whereas the vest begins as an aggression toward yourself, which you then spread to others. And so I just thought it was a much more potent metaphor. My grandfather was a celery farmer in Muskegon, Michigan, and he died in exactly this fashion. Took his boys to the bank, died in the elevator, and said, take off my shoes, I'm staying on holy ground, which is a quote from Moses. And I gave Toller that speech just to show how far gone he was. He's talking about a kid who blows his head off in a suicide. And he's saying about this kid, he stands on holy ground. Well, that is clearly outside the theological pale. When he's gotten himself to a position where he's saying that this boy who shot his head off is a saint, well, he is, nothing good's going to happen now. So then I went to the next one I thought of, which is the country priest ending, which is where the priest is dying, he falls off screen, dies off screen, and we're left with the vision of the crucifix on the wall. And that was the first version I wrote. That's the ending for this movie. The carnal response to divine intervention. Not this is holy, but this is heaven. Carnality. And I thought, Toller is standing there with the cup from Gethsemane. And he drinks it, and he falls on hands and knees, and he's purging out his insides. And God, who has refused to talk to him, now walks over to him and says, Reverend Toller, do you want to know what heaven looks like? I'm going to show you right now. I'm going to pull back the curtains. This is what heaven looked like. It looks like one long kiss. And that's the last thing he sees. the answer is courage. You need the courage to hold hope and despair simultaneously. We now live in a time where there is relatively little reason for hope. So the question becomes, do you just give up? Or do you hope because hope itself makes life livable? As Albert Camus said, I don't believe, I choose to believe. So should we now say, I don't hope, I choose to hope? And that's what Torah says, we must choose to hope in the face of all evidence otherwise, because life is not tenable if we don't make that choice.
Thank you so much for making this movie, and thank you so much for being here.